Business tycoon Ji Yunfei became a vegetative due to a deliberate explosion, and doctors say he is hopeless. Gu Zhining was happy to marry Ji Yunfei for the medical expenses of her mother and stepfather. Just waiting for the money to be used as a tool, let go of this marriage as soon as my husband dies. Who would have thought that on wedding night, Ji Yunfei woke up? Everyone thought that Ji Yunfei would quickly divorce Gu Zhining. Who knew that Gu Zhining not only worked as a secretary for him in the company, but also in private? The abstinent old man lost control time and time again when facing his petite wife. A year later, when Gu Zhining unexpectedly became pregnant and hit her belly to run away, Ji Yunfei hugged her tightly and said, "Wife, as long as I don't divorce, I can do anything." Chapter 1. Marriage Substitution. Is this really a vegetarian? You are listening at novel FUL.audio. When Gu Zhining was sent to the Ji family, the sky was already dark. In terms of time, this is definitely not an auspicious time for welcoming and paying respects. She got off the car in a complex and gorgeous red wedding dress, as if haunted in the darkness. Before she could stand firm, someone behind her eagerly pushed her. The next second, an impatient female voice sounded, "What are you hesitating about? I'm telling you, if you regret it now, you won't get a penny. Then, wait for your mother lying in the intensive care unit and your little white-faced stepfather to be collected." Upon hearing this, Gu Zhining couldn't help but tug at the corner of her lips and turned to look at Shen Wanyu. She said coldly, "Don't worry, I won't regret it. After all, since my mother's car accident, the ICU has been burning money every day, borrowing everything she can, but that's just a drop in the bucket. If it weren't for her dear stepmother knocking on her door and admitting that she could bear her mother's medical expenses, she would probably have sold herself." Shen Wanyu asked her to marry a vegetative person for Gu Yanyan. It sounds very cost-effective. Anyway, selling to someone is not selling. Selling to a vegetable is at least easier. With this in mind, Gu Zhining's smile became sincere. She took out her phone from her pocket and shook it in front of Shen Wanyu, saying, "I have recorded everything you said just now. Remember to fulfill the contract. As long as your money is in place, I promise to serve Ji Yunfei comfortably and smoothly." Shen Wanyu snorted coldly, "It's good if you know, I can't do without you." Gu Zhining lowered her eyes and straightened out the messy hem of her wedding dress, then walked into the estate in front of her. When agreeing to Shen Wanyu's terms, she had heard of some background from the Ji family. The Ji family has been in business for 3 generations and has developed into a giant, unshakable like a tangled ancient wood. Compared to the Ji family, Gu Zhining, whom Shen Wanyu has put in a lot of effort to seduce, is a rising star. As for the second young master of the Ji family whom she is going to marry, Gu Zhining lowered her eyes and flashed through her mind some relevant news that she had specifically researched before. 3 years ago, the media unanimously praised Ji Yunfei, the second son of the Ji family, as a rare genius in the business world for 100 years. He was exceptionally talented and was appointed as the heir by Mr. Ji. But all of this came to an end in that accident. Ji Yunfei was inspecting a pharmaceutical factory under the group when an explosion occurred. He was too close to the exploded machine at the time, and although he did not die after rescue, he became a vegetative and lay in bed for 3 years. In the past 3 years, Mr. Ji has visited famous doctors all over the world, and has put in a lot of effort. He even went to pray to gods and Buddha, and scattered a lot of incense money, but it had no effect. He simply thought of the method of Chongshi. The one who closes the 8 characters with Ji Yunfei is her half-sister Gu Yanyan. Of course, Gu Yanyan refused to marry into a widowed family. She cried, made a scene, and hung herself 3 times. Gu Zhining was extremely anxious and slapped his thigh, remembering that he also had a daughter named Gu Zhining who had long been kicked out of the house. Coincidentally, the 2 were born on the same day. Afraid that the Ji family would see any clues, they used the excuse that it was important for Ji Yunfei to celebrate, and all the rituals were simplified. They directly sent Gu Zhining to the Ji family. The butler was already waiting in front of the hall, and when Gu Zhining came over, he hurriedly welcomed him and said, "Second young madam. You have arrived. Please come with me quickly." Gu Zhining was stunned and said, "What are you going for? Isn't it true that she married a vegetative person? Is it urgent to enter the bridal chamber?" The caregiver who took care of the second young master suddenly had some trouble at home today and couldn't come. The butler walked quickly ahead and explained to her, "So now we need you to hurry over and take care of second young master." Gu Zhining, who had been put on the shelves after being driven away, changed off her bright red wedding dress. Before she could take a sip of water and rest for a few minutes, she was sent to Ji Yunfei's room. The strong smell of disinfectant rushed over her face, and she looked around a few times, unable to help but sigh in her heart. It can be seen that Mr. Ji really values his second grandson very much. The spacious room has been pierced through the middle wall, and there are nameless medical instruments piled up, all imported from abroad. Perhaps the equipment in the most advanced hospital in Tongcheng is not as complete as here. The man on the hospital bed, with his eyes tightly closed, his face pale and devoid of any blood, but his facial features were quite beautiful. His face was deep and sharp, almost a perfect work of art. The butler instructed some things to pay attention to and retreated out. Gu Zhining had never done such a job before, and for a moment felt a bit at a loss. After a few minutes of confusion, he remembered to go and fetch a full basin of water and wet the towel. The man on the bed was ignorant and unaware. Gu Zhining carefully lifted the blanket, unbuttoned the buttons of Ji Yunfei's hospital gown one by one, and immediately widened her eyes. The skin texture of the subordinates cannot be better, and under the tight skin, there is a solid sense of strength, like a good cold jade. It's a pity that this figure doesn't need to be cupped or punctured a few times. Gu Zhining murmured and couldn't help but extend her paw again. She touched and tugged at the muscles on Ji Yunfei's face a few times, feeling better and better. This is really a vegetative person. Isn't it said in the book that the vegetative person's muscles have shrunk? How can it still feel like an inflatable doll when touched? As soon as she finished speaking, Ji Yunfei's thick black and slender eyelashes suddenly moved. Gu Zhining was startled and immediately let go of her still mischievous hand, subconsciously holding her breath. However, Ji Yunfei still remained calm with his eyes closed, without any movement. It seems like it's just an instinctive reaction of the body. It has been written in medical books I have read before that vegetative beings are not completely unaware of the outside world, but also exhibit behaviors and actions similar to conditioned reflexes. Sorry. She rubbed her hand against her body with a guilty heart, silently reciting, "Color is emptiness is color," twice in her heart. She took a deep breath, looked at her nose, and heart, and brought a basin of water to wipe Ji Yunfei's body. Gu Zhining soaked the towel in hot water, intending to start from her arm. She grabbed Ji Yunfei's hand resting on the bedside, but was slightly stunned when she touched her pulse. The pulse felt between the fingers doesn't seem to be what a vegetative person should have. Gu Zhining's wrist trembled, but she accidentally bumped into a nearby basin. Suddenly, half of the hot water poured out, soaking half of Ji Yunfei's body. Ah! Watching the man's cold white chest turn red with a scorch, she quickly grabbed a dry towel to wipe it off, but her wrist was pressed down. Gu Zhining was taken aback for a moment, and as she lifted her eyes, she met a pair of ink-like eyes, with an undisguised anger beneath them. Chapter 2. This marriage must not be divorced. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. The man who had just woken up had no warmth in his voice, and every word seemed to squeeze out from between his teeth. Get lost. Why is this person so impolite? Gu Zhining was stunned for a moment before realizing later that Ji Yunfei had woken up. Mr. Ji has been tinkering around for 3 years, visiting famous doctors and praying to gods and Buddha, but he hasn't woken up yet. Now, he has been woken up by his own pot of hot water. No, how could it be so simple? Thinking of the pulse she had just touched, Gu Zhining's mind twitched and she immediately approached her with a towel. Husband. It's really great that you woke up. I didn't mean to. You see, you're all burning red. Let me help you take a look. As she spoke, she also wanted to take the opportunity to take a pulse of Ji Yunfei, but was rudely waved away. The man's face was deep and angry, his voice was hoarse and weak, but it was terrifyingly cold and harsh. Can't you understand what I just said? Get out. The commotion here quickly attracted many people. The room door was pushed open, and a large crowd rushed in, blocking the spacious room. Mr. Ji, leaning on a cane and with the help of the butler, rushed over. When he saw Ji Yunfei, his eyes turned red. Wake up, really wake up. Old Master Ji burst into tears of joy, almost bursting into tears. He tightly grasped Gu Zhining's hand and his voice trembled a bit. Sure enough, it worked. Gu family girl, this is all your credit. Gu Zhining was very uncomfortable with such treatment, and couldn't say a word with a dry laugh. What credit is it? Is it due to her pot of hot water? However, when Ji Yunfei woke up, this matter was too significant. In contrast, no one cared about the water stains and chaos in that area. Grandpa, don't get too excited and pay attention to your health. A graceful and gentle male voice rang out, and Gu Zhining followed the sound. The person speaking had a 5-point resemblance to Ji Yunfei in appearance, but had a much softer temperament. A pair of golden glasses were placed on the bridge of her nose, making her face even more gentle and refined. Gu Zhining remembered that this was probably Ji Yunchuan, the older brother of Ji Yunfei. Ji Yunchuan helped Grandpa Ji and gently instructed the servant to prepare a sedative medicine. He also ordered the doctor to come up and check Ji Yunfei's condition. Since Ji Yunfei became a vegetative, the Ji family has never lacked a doctor the most. Mr. Ji has almost prepared an entire medical team on standby at any time. Several doctors worked together to do some examinations, then gathered together to discuss a few more words. The first one sighed and whispered, the second young man's current situation has stabilized. It's just because the explosion injured his nerves and he was bedridden for too long. The second young man still has some problems with his spine, and I'm afraid he won't be able to stand up for the time being. Mr. Ji was originally helped aside to rest, but upon hearing this, he urgently stood up and said, "What does this mean?" "Don't get excited yet," the doctor quickly comforted. "It's not necessarily that you won't be able to stand up forever, but for now, we can only do the reconstruction work first and then observe." Ji Yunchuan frowned and said, "Doctor, is there no other way? My younger brother is still young and can't stay in a wheelchair for a lifetime." Compared to others, Ji Yunfei's attitude is much calmer. He had already buttoned his clothes, but his expression showed no signs of easing. He didn't even look at his legs, only raised his eyes, and his gaze condensed on Gu Zhining outside the crowd, saying, "Who is she?" Mr. Ji suppressed his emotions and suddenly thought to himself, since Gu Zhining had just married, Ji Yunfei would wake up. Maybe it will take a little longer, and this leg will also be fine. This is the eldest lady of the Gu family, your newlywed wife. Mr. Ji quickly pulled Gu Zhining over and said, "I've calculated with someone. Your 8 characters are a perfect match." Ji Yunfei stared coldly at Gu Zhining for 2 seconds before unquestionably uttering 2 words. "Divorce. No way. This marriage is absolutely impossible to divorce. Thanks to the blessing of this marriage, you have been able to wake up. If you get divorced, what will happen again?" said Mr. Ji in a stern refusal. Ji Yunfei's face turned even colder, "Thanks to the blessing of this marriage. If she didn't mess with me to death, I would tell my fortune." Mr. Ji wiped his bright red circles around his eyes and said, "Hello, rest well. We will have a detailed examination tomorrow and we won't disturb you." The people around the room retreated in 2s and 3s, and soon, only the 2 of them remained. Gu Zhining slowly approached, and as soon as she lifted the blanket, she was pushed away by Ji Yunfei, who was electrocuted. "What are you going to do? Sleep?" Gu Zhining blinked, innocent. Ji Yunfei's eyes were cold and sharp, with a chilling aura emanating from all over his body. Every word he uttered seemed to have been tempered with ice. If you have any purpose, it's best to explain it now. Otherwise, when I find out, your fate will not be as simple as a divorce. Gu Zhining seemed to have not understood the warning message in the man's words before her, and her face was pure. Husband, you misunderstood me when you said that. How can I say anything about the purpose? I fell in love with my husband at first sight, just like in a fairy tale. Isn't the prince also in love with Snow White in the coffin at first sight? Oh, although you haven't been in the coffin yet, just understand the meaning. Ji Yunfei's face turned black, and he naturally didn't believe the woman's spontaneous nonsense. Gu Zhining wanted to confess her feelings a few more words, but her phone suddenly shook and it was a text message. The sender was an unmarked phone number, and Gu Zhining lowered her eyes and glanced, slightly pursing her lips. I heard that Ji Yunfei has already woken up, but his legs seem to be disabled. This is a good opportunity, don't forget to tell you what to do. Ji Yunfei also saw it. He has always had a good eye, carefully reading the content of the text message. He sneered and waited for the woman in front of him to give him a reasonable explanation. Unexpectedly, Gu Zhining pressed off her phone as if nothing had happened, looked up at Ji Yunfei's gaze, and immediately said, "You're just selling coffins to me. Maybe you've been a vegetable for so long, so I thought you're going to die soon. Don't worry, I've already blacklisted him. The ability to tell lies when you open your eyes is quite good." Ji Yunfei sneered coldly, "Why pull black? Maybe in a while, you can use it." His voice was filled with a chilling killing intent. Gu Zhining shrank her neck and said slowly, "Then I'll go back and order a bigger one. We can both lie down, so we can be considered to be living and dying in the same cave as Chiu." Ji Yunfei's forehead was bulging with veins. This woman simply refuses to eat either soft or hard. Gu Zhining ultimately couldn't sleep in bed. She was even thrown to the ground by Ji Yunfei with a blanket before she even touched the edge of the bed. Okay, sleep on the ground. Chapter 3. He was poisoned. You are listening at novelful.audio. Gu Zhining was tired all day today and almost fell asleep. Ji Yunfei lay in bed, thinking that this woman would still crawl restlessly in the middle of the night, but he didn't hear anything for a while. As soon as he turned his head, he saw that Gu Zhining had already fallen asleep. Ji Yunfei had never been alone with an outsider at such a close distance before, and was extremely uncomfortable for a while. It wasn't until the second half of the night that he struggled to get some sleep. By contrast, Gu Zhining slept very well. The next morning, she got up early, and as soon as she got up, the butler knocked on the door. "Second young lady." Since Ji Yunfei woke up, the attitude of the entire Ji family towards her has changed more than earth-shattering. The butler, with a smile on his face, pushed the prepared wheelchair forward and said, "Regarding the daily life of the second young master, we need you to take care of him more. After all, the second young master's legs are inconvenient now." Gu Zhining opened her mouth and said, "Isn't there a caregiver? Where can a caregiver compare to being considerate to their own family?" The butler thrust a thick booklet into Gu Zhining's hand and said, "This is the area that caretakers need to pay attention to. Madame Lao Ershao has taken a lot of trouble." Gu Zhining didn't even have time to say a word of refusal, so the butler bowed and retreated. "Everything is for money, Gu Zhining silently recited several times in her heart, packed the booklet, and turned around to see that Ji Yunfei had not only woken up at some point, but was leaning against the bedside, coldly looking at her with a pale face and sharp eyes. "Husband, are you awake?" Gu Zhining immediately changed her expression and warmly welcomed Ji Yunfei, as she was about to move her from bed to a wheelchair. "Come on, I'll push you to the restroom," she said. Ji Yunfei rudely shook off her hand and said, "Let go." Gu Zhining's eyes rolled and she obediently let go of her hand. She turned to take hot water and wet the towel, saying, "Then I'll help you wash up." As she spoke, she accidentally shook her hand and the wet towel immediately fell onto Ji Yunfei's leg. "Oh, I'm sorry, my hand slipped." Gu Zhining apologized insincerely and, taking advantage of the gap between holding a towel, raised her hand to touch the pulse of Ji Yunfei's wrist. Last night was too hasty, and she interrupted her pulse halfway through, but she could also feel that the pulse was not correct. Now, upon seeing it, it is indeed so. This is not an unhealed injury caused by spinal cord damage, but rather a poisoning. She wanted to observe more carefully what poison it was, but Ji Yunfei didn't give her the chance again. His face turned pale, and he tightly gripped her wrist with such force that he left a piercing red mark on her fair wrist bone. "You." Gu Zhining felt a slight shock in her heart. The symptoms brought by the poison made her feel very familiar, as if it was not her first time encountering them. This. Before she could finish speaking, the room door was knocked on. The servant's voice came from outside the door. "Second young master, second young madam, the doctor brought by the eldest young master has arrived and said he will do the reconstruction for the second young master. He is currently waiting." Next came the voice of Ji Yunchuan. "I heard the butler say that Yunfei has already woken up, so let's just come in." After speaking, without waiting for anyone in the room to respond, he had already pushed the door open and entered. Gu Zhining frowned, feeling that the young master of the Ji family was indeed very impolite. Even if Ji Yunfei wakes up, it's just someone else's room. It's a bit too much to come in without someone else's consent. She peeked at Ji Yunfei, but there was no change in the expression on the handsome and incomparable face of the man. He remained indifferent and distant, and his gaze fell heavily on Ji Yunchuan, saying, "Big brother." Ji Yunchuan only saw a scene in the room when he walked in. Gu Zhining still maintained the posture of going to pick up towels on Ji Yunfei's body, while Ji Yunfei's shirt had already been soaked in water marks for most of it. At first glance, it seemed like a close relationship. So Yunfei is cultivating feelings with her siblings. He smiled meaningfully and said, "It seems like I'm disturbing you." Ji Yunfei let go of Gu Zhining's hand, neither cold nor indifferent, with a cold voice that could not detect any emotions. "Big brother, this is a misunderstanding." Ji Yunchuan clearly didn't care about any misunderstandings. He turned his body and gestured for the doctor behind him to come in. "These are all experts in the field of reconstruction that I just brought back from abroad yesterday. I believe they can help you stand up as soon as possible. It's not too late. Let these doctors come and show you now." As he spoke, he glanced at Gu Zhining. Gu Zhining nodded with a hint of amusement and said, "Then I'll go out first. If you need anything, just call me." She turned around and left the room, casually closing the door, her smile gradually fading. The media all say that Ji Jiada and Ji Ershao have a deep brotherly relationship. After Ji Yunfei's car accident, it was Ji Yunchuan who rushed to the scene at the first time. During the 3 years when Ji Yunfei was unconscious, Ji Yunchuan also put in a lot of effort. On the one hand, he had to take care of the entire Ji group, on the other hand, he had to take care of Mr. Ji, and on the other hand, he had to seek treatment from famous doctors abroad for Ji Yunfei. It is not an exaggeration to say that he had to put in his heart and lungs. But just what I saw today, it can only be said that rumors are not credible at all. What exactly is the poison on Ji Yunfei's body? Gu Zhining frowned and pondered, but her shoulder was suddenly bumped, and a sharp female voice came from her ear. "It seems that you are quite adapted to the identity of the second young lady of the Ji family." Gu Zhining looked up and recognized the person with a slightly cold expression. Gu Yanyan. Gu Yanyan was dressed in this year's latest high-end outfit, with exquisite makeup and a delicate face full of ridicule. She looked up and down at her a few times and said, "But your luck is really good. As soon as you got married, the living dead woke up, so you don't have to be a widow." Maybe it was me and Ji Yunfei who were quite compatible with each other's 8 characters that made us wake up in ecstasy. Gu Zhining returned lightly. "Humph, it's not my 8 yet." Gu Yanyan sneered coldly, and as soon as he spoke, he realized it was not appropriate. He quickly swallowed the remaining words. She glared fiercely at the person who almost let her slip her tongue and said, "But even if Ji Yunfei wakes up, Yun Chuan's brother has told me that he can't even stand up now. He's just a useless person. Mr. Ji won't let a useless person inherit the Ji family." Gu Zhining didn't seem to have any emotions stirred up by Gu Yanyan's words, and her tone remained calm. So, it's best for you to be more sensible and recognize your own identity." Gu Yanyan hugged her arms and laughed arrogantly. "Don't think that marrying Ji Yunfei is like flying up a branch and becoming a phoenix. You will always be just a dog raised by the Gu family." Chapter 4, Let Go. I'm going to be choked to death by you. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Well, a dog from the Gu family. Gu Zhining repeated, her eyes suddenly turning cold. It's good if you know. Gu Yanyan felt proud and continued, do what my father has instructed you to do. In the future, when I marry brother Yunchuan and become the mistress of the Ji family, maybe I can even give you another bite to eat. Before she could finish speaking, her collar was suddenly pulled, and she lost her center of gravity in an instant. She stumbled and was pulled over by Gu Zhining. Ah! Accompanied by Gu Yanyan's screams, Gu Zhining grabbed her collar and pushed her heavily onto the railing of the third-floor corridor, causing her to hang half of her body outside the railing. Are you crazy? Gu Yanyan's face turned pale as she desperately tried to grab the railing, but it was of no use. She could only hang outside the railing and sway, her voice trembling with a hint of trembling. She insisted on making a calm threat, if you dare to do this to me, I'll tell my dad later that he won't let you go. Okay. Gu Zhining smiled and spoke slowly, go ahead and show your good father that your own dog can also bite people. At the end of the sentence, her tone had already taken on a chilly chill, and she was about to let go of her momentum. Seeing her really coming, Gu Yanyan was scared out of her wits and couldn't put on that arrogant look anymore. She begged repeatedly, no, don't let go. This is the third floor. Gu Zhining gently answered her, it's just the third floor. If you can't die, at most it's just a broken leg or a broken hand. After speaking, she did indeed loosen her tightly clenched fingers one by one, until an urgent male voice came from behind. Stop it. Gu Zhining turned her eyes and saw Ji Yunchuan hurriedly rushing forward, pulling Gu Yanyan off the railing. Gu Yanyan seemed to have found some backbone and leaned against Ji Yunchuan's arms, crying bitterly. Brother Yunchuan, I'm so scared. My sister, she's just crazy. Gu Zhining patted her hands casually and said nonsense without any sincerity, I'm really sorry, my hand slipped. But I don't think Yan Yan's sister is so magnanimous, do you mind? Ji Yunchuan's face didn't look very good either. He turned his eyes to Ji Yunfei, who was sitting in a wheelchair and came out of the room calmly. Yunfei, is your wife a bit too much? Big brother, why don't you first ask your little girlfriend what she did or said? Ji Yunfei raised his eyes slightly and glanced over Gu Zhining, then stopped on Gu Yanyan, who was still shivering beside Ji Yunchuan, and suddenly hooked his lips. What's more, my wife and your little girlfriend are not sisters, maybe they are just playing together. Why do you rush to help your girlfriend out? Ji Yunchuan was blocked back by this neither soft nor hard nail, and his expression was bright and tense for a moment. Gu Zhining didn't expect Ji Yunfei to speak for her. She was surprised and glanced at him proficiently, saying, that's right, my dear sister. I was just joking with you. As for crying and suing Master Ji, I'm not a kindergarten kid anymore. Whenever I have something to do, I have to talk to a teacher, right? Gu Yan's smoke was not light. You. Ji Yunchuan's eyes were gloomy, and he instinctively clenched his fist. His voice was hoarse, Yunfei, I advise you to think more when speaking. You heard what the doctor said just now. Your legs may not be able to stand up for the rest of your life, and you will have to sit in a wheelchair for a lifetime in the future. Gu Zhining was surprised and looked at Ji Yunfei, only to find that Ji Yunfei still had that calm and indifferent expression, not even moving her eyelashes. It seems that Ji Yunchuan is really certain that his younger brother's legs are disabled, otherwise he would not have torn off his previously gentle mask and made no effort to conceal it. Ji Yunchuan let out a cold snort and left with Gu Yanyan. Gu Zhining was still standing in place pondering what Ji Yunchuan had just said, but the sound of a wheelchair spinning could be heard in her ear. Looking up, Ji Yunfei had already returned to her room. She quickly caught up and grabbed the push hand of the wheelchair, saying, "Don't rush, husband." Ji Yunfei coldly uttered 2 words. "Let go." "Don't let it go." Gu Zhining not only didn't let go, but also squatted down beside Ji Yunfei's leg, and the other hand touched his leg without any hesitation. Ji Yunfei's face suddenly changed and he said, "Get lost. Don't be so excited." Gu Zhining smiled and said, "Actually, I have always had a curious question. I wonder if Ji Yunfei can help me clarify it. Since yesterday when you woke up and said you had legs disabled, you don't seem surprised or sad at all." As soon as she finished speaking, her cold hand suddenly caught her slender throat. The man tightened his grip and said indifferently, "What do you want to say?" Gu Zhining was choked by him and had some difficulty breathing. Her face turned red and she said, quickly, "Let go. You're going to strangle her." Ji Yunfei let go of her hand and covered her chest, coughing for a long time before finally calming down. "So nervous, don't you know there's a word called guilty heart? She rolled her eyes and saw the man in front of her with a cold expression. She cleverly changed the topic and said, "I don't mean anything else, I just want to make a deal with Ji Yunfei." Gu Zhining gave a faint smile and said slowly, "Other doctors determined that you were disabled because they were fundamentally wrong. Your leg injury was not caused by a car accident, but by poisoning." Ji Yunfei's expression remained unchanged, staring coldly at her and saying, "So? Did you already know this attitude?" Gu Zhining's mind suddenly changed, but on the surface, she remained calm and said, "I can help you untangle this poison and get you up again, but correspondingly, Ji Yunfei will also help me." But before she could finish speaking, Ji Yunfei interrupted her, "I never do business with people of unknown origin." The pitch-black eyes were devoid of any emotion, and he spoke with a cold expression, "This marriage was arranged by my grandfather. I will resolve it as soon as possible, but before that, it's best for you to learn how to write the words 'Keep your composure.' If you can't learn, I can have someone engrave it on your face." Gu Zhining instinctively touched her face and said, "It's so fierce." Although she said so, there was no sign of fear on her face. Instead, she grabbed Ji Yunfei's hand and said, "Husband, I know you don't believe me. Can I prove it to you? In 2 days, it will be my newlywed wife's return day. Please accompany me back, and I can temporarily suppress the toxicity in your body. When you see the effect, you will naturally know whether what I said is true or false." She tilted her head and looked eager to try. "How about it? Anyway, just accompany me back, and you don't need to pay anything. It's a waste of money." Chapter 5. No face at all. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. The answer to Gu Zhining was a cold sneer from Ji Yunfei. Immediately after, she was mercilessly thrown away, and Ji Yunfei entered the study without looking back. The door was slammed shut with a bang, almost missing Gu Zhining's nose. Gu Zhining was pushed down and sat on the ground, unable to resist kicking the door panel. This person doesn't listen to anyone at all, he's doing it for his own good. However, for a person with hemiplegia, the temptation of her proposed conditions should not be small, and she does not believe it. Ji Yunfei can resist it. In the study, Ji Yunfei's personal assistant Pei Ji had been waiting for a while. "Mr. Ji." Pei Ji handed over a stack of sealed documents and said, "You instructed me to investigate the second young lady before, but the result has come out. The young lady is the original miss of the Gu family. However, since Gu Guisheng divorced his original wife more than a decade ago, Madame Xiao's mother left the house with Madame Xiao, and the Gu family expelled Madame Xiao. The marriage arranged by the old man this time was originally intended for the young lady of the family to marry over, but I don't know why she suddenly became the young lady. Ji Yunfei opened the file and browsed through it at a glance, with a cold curl on his lips. What's so puzzling about this? It's just that the Gu family didn't want their precious daughter to marry them as a widower, so they played such a clever game of changing from a civet cat to a crown prince. I'm not afraid. However, from the information alone, Gu Zhining's problem is not small. Although graduated from a top medical university, she has no medical experience, and her leg was diagnosed by many famous doctors before reaching a conclusion. Where did she come from to say that she could cure him? Keep people watching. Ji Yunfei casually threw the information aside with a cold expression, since the purpose is not pure, sooner or later it will reveal its flaws. The day of returning home will arrive soon. Gu Zhining got up, but there was no figure of Ji Yunfei in the room. She went downstairs and asked the butler before learning that Ji Yunfei had gone to the company early in the morning without even leaving a word. Gu Zhining was stunned and gritted her teeth heavily. Okay, that's great. The butler is aware of the tradition of returning home. When a newlywed woman returns to her mother's house without her husband accompanying her, it is shameless and against the rules no matter where she is. Well, Madam Second Young Master, why don't you wait a moment? Maybe Second Young Master forgot. The butler said cautiously, I'll go call Second Young Master and see if he can make it back. No need. Gu Zhining suppressed her anger in her heart and sneered and refused. What can't be forgotten? Ji Yunfei sincerely doesn't want to accompany her. Even if he makes another 180 phone calls, he may not come back. Since that's the case, there's no need to waste time. When Gu Zhining returned to his home, it was already noon. Mr. Ji felt a little guilty about her returning home alone. He prepared a particularly heavy gift and personally assigned a driver to pick her up and drop her off. Gu Zhining got off the car and looked up at the familiar and unfamiliar place in front of him. Since the age of 7, she and her mother have been kicked out of here by Gu Guosheng, and this is the first time they have returned. The decoration of the villa has long been very different. In Gu Zhining's distant memories, when she was a child, she particularly liked bell orchids. Her mother planted a large area in the courtyard in front of the villa door, and every time the flowers bloomed, the fragrance lingered. But now, the flower bed has been completely leveled, not even a single plant can be left. Gu Zhining lowered her gaze and lifted her step to knock on the door. Gu Guosheng and Shen Wanyu knew she was coming back today, but they didn't even arrange for anyone to pick her up. Gu Zhining rang the doorbell for a while before someone opened the door. It's Gu Yanyan. Oh, I thought it was some beggar begging at my doorstep. It turned out to be my sister. Gu Yanyan was still holding a grudge against Gu Zhining for pressing her onto the railing before, and his words were sarcastic and sarcastic. She poked her head behind Gu Zhining and noticed that she came alone. She laughed even more disdainfully and said, on the day we return home, we all come back alone. It seems that the Ji family doesn't take you seriously, or is it that your disabled husband got into a car accident again and died? Yan, what nonsense. A deep male voice rang out, and Gu Guosheng gave Gu Yanyan a half-reproachful glare and scolded, no big or small, this is your sister. Shen Wanyu also came forward to lend a helping hand and said with a hint, besides, your sister is now the second young lady of the Ji family. It's different now than before. Even if you don't look at her, you have to consider Ji's face, right? Gu Zhining watched the performance of this family calmly, singing with a red and white face. Come on, Ning Ning, stop standing and come in quickly. Shen Wanyu reached out to pull Gu Zhining into the door, but was lightly dodged by Gu Zhining, leaving her hand empty. Gu Zhining didn't even glance at her, so she entered the door without hesitation and sat down on the sofa. Shen Wanyu's face couldn't hold back, and she couldn't resist it until she finally stopped. As soon as the door closed, Gu Guosheng couldn't wait to say, have you gained anything from staying at the Ji family these days? Gu Zhining raised her eyebrows and said, which aspect are you asking about? Gu Guosheng said impatiently, didn't I make it clear to you before that I asked you to marry into the Ji family? I want the mine in the Ji family's hands, and once it's done, it will naturally benefit you. Otherwise, do you think it's a waste of letting you marry Ji Yunfei and become a wealthy lady with peace of mind? Gu Zhining had a cold smile on her lips, and it was fortunate that Gu Guosheng could speak such words without shame. She really didn't want any face. Gu Yanyan sneered, don't even think about it. Before marrying Ji Yunfei, you lived every day, not even as good as our stray dog. Now you have transformed into the second young lady of the Ji family. Such great luck is something that no one else can ask for. I can give this luck to you now, sister. Gu Zhining retorted, anyway, Ji Yunfei has also woken up now. If you're willing, I can go find Mr. Ji now and exchange the marriage. How would Gu Yanyan be willing? She was about to curse and was stopped by Gu Guosheng. Gu Guosheng's expression was not particularly attractive. Don't say such nonsense, has there been any progress? No. She spread out her hand and said in a low voice, I've only been married for a few days. Where did I have the opportunity to propose a mine? Gu Guosheng's face darkened and he said, but I heard that Mr. Ji really likes you. What's the use of it? Gu Zhining rolled her eyes, Mr. Ji is already old. Isn't it the young master of the Ji family who is in charge now? You also know that the person in charge of the Ji family now is Master Ji. Gu Guosheng snorted coldly and said, so what if Ji Yunfei wakes up? He's still a paralyzed person with disabled legs. How could a paralyzed person hand over such a large family business to the Ji family? Shouldn't he still give it to dies.Who? Chapter 6. Husband, didn't you say you can't come? You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Gu Zhining curled her lips and smiled lightly. She didn't think that the muddy waters of the Ji family would be so easy to navigate. If you are sensible, you should find a way to get hold of that mine as soon as possible, Shen Wanyu helped out on the side. Now that Mr. Ji is completely convinced that you have cured him through your efforts, can't you take this opportunity to give him more encouragement? I don't believe him, he won't allow you anything. Gu Zhining said calmly, if you don't believe it, you can go find the old man and ask him in person. Even if the Shen family used Chongshi to connect with the Ji family, a century-old family, is completely incomparable to them. Shen Wanyu was stabbed and didn't turn her face as expected by Gu Zhining. Instead, she took out a small medicine bottle from her bag and stuffed it into her hand. This is the medicine I specially entrusted my friend with. One pill will take effect and it will not cause any harm to the human body. She paused and looked up and down at Gu Zhining, anyway, you're already married to Ji Yunfei now. This kind of thing doesn't have to be done sooner or later. When the raw rice is cooked and cooked, what's the point? Ji Yunfei is a cripple now, and it's not likely to work in that area. You can take this medicine then. Halfway through, Gu Zhining understood Shen Wanyu's meaning and felt nauseous. This family can be so nauseous to this extent. Shen Wanyu saw that she didn't answer and forcefully tried to put the medicine bottle into her palm. Gu Zhining didn't hesitate to shake his hand and avoid it, causing the medicine bottle to fall to the ground with a dull sound. What do you mean? You want to rebel, don't you? Gu Guosheng was immediately furious. He stood up with a swoop and pointed straight at Gu Zhining's nose, cursing loudly, what are you pretending to be lofty now? If you enter the Ji family, it's just for you to sell it. How dare you put on airs here? Gu Yanyan gloated at the excitement and sneered, that's right, sister. My mother is doing it for your own good. If Ji Ershao really hurts that aspect of his function, wouldn't you have to be a widow? Gu Zhining clenched her palm tightly, and the last bit of warmth in her heart was poured cold under Gu Guosheng's piercing insult. All right, husband, don't be too angry either. I believe Ning Ning is still a good child until she becomes more serious. Shen Wanyu smiled and spoke, seeming to be trying to smooth things out, but when she spoke again, there was an obvious threat in her words. But Ning Ning, don't forget that you are currently enjoying your life in the Ji family, but your mother and stepfather are still in the Gu family's hospital. It seems like they haven't left the intensive care unit yet, right? Gu Zhining's pupils tightened instantly. Her parents are her only weakness, but now they have become a bargaining chip for the Gu family to manipulate her recklessly. So, you better be obedient. As long as we get the mine, your mother and stepfather will receive the best treatment. Shen Wanyu bent down to pick up the medicine bottle from the ground and handed it over again. Tonight, let's give it to Ji Yunfei to try. If he can conceive a child in one go, that would be great. If he really hurts there and can't even use medicine, then he can only think of other ways. However, before she could finish speaking, the living room door was smashed open. With a loud bang, everyone was startled. Gu Zhining turned around and was stunned when she saw someone coming. Ji Yunfei sat in a wheelchair, but without any sense of oppression. Her facial features were as cold and sharp as ice, unable to pick out any flaws. She scanned the people in the living room with a heavy gaze, and finally stopped at Shen Wanyu with a smile on her face. I didn't expect Mrs. Gu to still care about my personal affairs, she said with a smile on her face. I didn't expect Ji Yunfei to come over at this time, not even to announce it, and just burst in like this. Not only Shen Wanyu, but also Gu Guosheng and Gu Yanyan's faces changed. Even if Ji Yunfei really collapsed, there are rumors from the outside world that Mr. Ji wants to give his successor's position to Ji Yunchuan. Ji Yunfei has already passed away, but just because the name of the Ji family is still on him, this person is not something they can afford to offend. Shen Wanyu quickly put away the bottle, but she could still pretend that nothing had happened. She smiled and tried to reconcile the situation, saying, Ji Ershao, you misunderstood. It's Ning Ningchu's married woman, and she doesn't understand many things. I'm teaching her, but I didn't expect you to hear from Ji Ershao. Is that so? Ji Yunfei sneered, so you guys have an open family background, and we all need to sit here and discuss this matter together. Gu Guosheng's face turned pale with iron. How could he not hear the irony in Ji Yunfei's words? He didn't even show any face. Ji Yunfei had already retracted his gaze, as if he didn't even bother to look at them again. His thin lips spat out a sentence. Not yet. In fact, he didn't need to say it. Gu Zhining had already run over obediently and cleverly, with a gentle, virtuous, innocent appearance, and a sweet voice. Husband, aren't you unable to speak? Ji Yunfei didn't answer, just turned the wheelchair and left the Gu family without looking back. Gu Zhining immediately followed suit. As soon as she walked out of the door, she heard Gu Guosheng angrily smashing his cup behind her, with a sarcastic hook on his lips, but he didn't turn back. Ji Yunfei's car was parked in front of the Gu family. Gu Zhining smiled and leaned forward, hugging the man's arm, saying, I knew you didn't trust me. Are you still tough and soft-hearted? Don't be too sentimental here. Ji Yunfei mercilessly pushed her away and said, I'm just trying to find out your identity and your purpose of sneaking into the Ji family. Gu Zhining showed no self-consciousness of hitting a nail, tilted her head slightly and smiled brightly, my goal is either to tell you already, or to cure your leg. Ji Yunfei lowered his gaze, his leg still had no sensation. When he went to the hospital for examination today, although the doctor's words were gentle, it meant that there was no possibility of cure. Moreover, according to the information obtained earlier, the relationship between Gu Zhining and the Gu family is not good, and it is indeed the case when I saw them today. Without any background or status, where did she gain confidence? Then show some sincerity. After a brief silence, Ji Yunfei's indifferent voice rang out in the carriage, but if I were to find out that your words are just an excuse to protect you from being kicked out of the Ji family, the price you have to pay is far beyond what you can bear. The danger in the words was self-evident, and the atmosphere seemed to tense up in that moment. But Gu Zhining seemed completely unaware, with victory in her sparkling eyes. She spoke confidently, "Don't worry, I won't just watch my husband stay in a wheelchair for the rest of his life." Returning to the Ji family, Gu Zhining pushed Ji Yunfei back into the room and closed the door with her back hand. She crouched down in front of the wheelchair and carefully rolled up Ji Yunfei's pants, revealing her legs that had been paralyzed for a long time and had shown muscle atrophy, pale to the point where there was no trace of blood. Can you trust me now? Chapter 7. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Returning to the Ji family, Gu Zhining pushed Ji Yunfei back into the room and closed the door with her back hand. She crouched down in front of the wheelchair and carefully rolled up Ji Yunfei's pants, revealing her legs that had been paralyzed for a long time and had shown muscle atrophy, pale to the point where there was no trace of blood. Let go. This undisguised scrutiny made Ji Yunfei extremely uncomfortable. He was about to push Gu Zhining away when he suddenly reached out and pressed down on a certain part of his leg. The next second, an inexplicable tingling sensation rushed up along the meridians, but then it turned into a needle-piercing pain that instantly spread throughout the body. Ji Yunfei frowned heavily and instinctively grabbed the woman's hand in front of her, pressing her heavily to the ground. He coldly questioned, "What did you do? What can I do?" Gu Zhining rolled her eyes and lazily said, "Of course I'm treating your illness. Didn't young Master Ji Heir ask me to show some sincerity?" Ji Yunfei's face darkened. Compared to the woman's lies, he believed more that she had done something in secret. For example, today at the Gu family, he saw the bottle of medicine in Shen Wanyu's hand that had not been hidden in time. Sure enough, we still can't leave such a big hidden danger. Ji Yunfei's eyes were cold and sharp, but he suddenly felt the pain inside his body transform into an indescribable heat flowing straight down into his legs. Although the original strong stimulation became much weaker as soon as it entered the legs, it was much better than before when I was unaware. He has tried these legs countless times, but no matter how stimulating they are, they cannot leave any feeling, like a pool of stagnant water. But now, the woman only pressed a few times and then had such a clear reaction. Gu Zhining touched the astonishment in the man's eyes that he couldn't hide in time. He curled his lips and said, "So, I didn't lie to you, did I? Don't you let go of me." As soon as she finished speaking, the door to the room was pushed open. "Yunfei, why didn't you respond for a long time? The servant said you went into the bedroom as soon as you came back." Mr. Ji stood at the door with a cane, and before he could step in, he saw the scene before him, and his face burst into laughter. He quickly retreated and thoughtfully closed the door, saying, "I didn't see anything. You guys keep going, keep going." Mr. Ji originally thought that his grandson had just woken up and his body should not have fully recovered, but now it seems this wife, you really got married right. Ji Yunfei's face turned pale, he didn't even have time to explain. Gu Zhining slowly got up from the ground, his face full of innocence. "This is your initiative, it has nothing to do with me." She pushed Ji Yunfei back into the wheelchair and said, "Don't move around, it's not over yet." With these words, Gu Zhining has already felt out the acupuncture and moxibustion bag, pulled out several cold shining silver needles from it, found the right acupoint, and stabbed straight down without blinking. Almost at the moment when the silver needle entered the body, Ji Yunfei felt a stream of heat flowing along his still dry legs, accompanied by a faint heat in his blood. With Gu Zhining's movements, this tactile sensation became even stronger. Gu Zhining focused on twisting the silver needle, and for more than 10 minutes, she withdrew her hand and pulled out the needles one by one. "Alright, that's all for today." As she put away the acupuncture and moxibustion bag, she exhaled, "I'm really tired. You've been poisoned for too long, so you can only take it slowly. If you act too quickly, it's not conducive to removing the toxin. In this way, acupuncture and moxibustion is massaged once a day, and I'll give you medicine after a month." The heat on his legs had not yet dissipated, and Ji Yunfei's eyes were complex. Unexpectedly, this woman's repeated claims that she could cure his legs were not fake. Gu Zhining raised an eyebrow and said, so, can you trust me now? Even so, Ji Yunfei still answered directly. The cost of that accident back then was so heavy that he can no longer trust anyone until now. I will have someone draft an agreement. He said in a deep voice, it's about this marriage. As an exchange for you fixing my leg, I won't file for divorce within 2 years. In front of outsiders, you are the legitimate Mrs. Ji, but only 2 years. In 2 years, if we divorce, I will compensate you extra. 2 years. It doesn't sound too long, but in terms of what she wants to do, it's already enough. Gu Zhining snorted and said, young Master Ji Heir is thoughtful and the transaction is very fair. She grabbed Ji Yunfei's hand and patted it lightly, then smiled and said, deal. Ji Yunfei was caught off guard and instinctively withdrew his hand, but the touch he had just made seemed to remain in his palm. Even 3 years ago, before he lay in bed and became a vegetative, he rarely had such contact with people. It seems that an additional clause needs to be added to the agreement. Do not touch or move casually. The next morning, Ji Yunfei went to the company early in the morning, and his assistant Pei Ji was already waiting in the office. Mr. Ji, this is the agreement you need. Pei Ji respectfully submitted the document to the front and said, 2 copies. Do you need me to find someone to deliver them to madam? No need. Ji Yunfei flipped through it casually, confirming that there were no mistakes or omissions before saying, I will personally give it to her. Pei Ji responded, but did not withdraw. He hesitated for a moment before saying, also, Mr. Ji, most of the current shareholders of the company have defected to the young master, including those in previous projects. Even your secretariat now has his people. The materials you ordered before were pushed 3 times and 4 times by the management department, which refused to provide them. There are quite a few excuses, and it seems that someone has instructed them. Ji Yunfei smiled without any warmth and said, it seems that my big brother has extended his hand quite long. He has been in a coma for 3 years. Ji Yunchuan is not idle at all. He not only replaced his staff, but also boldly inserted the eyeliner around him. In this way, he will inevitably be tied up. Although he is not helpless, it is also troublesome to deal with it. Pei Ji asked anxiously, so General Ji, what should we do now? Without waiting for Ji Yunfei to answer, the office door was knocked on. May I come in? Surprisingly, it was Gu Zhining's voice. Ji Yunfei said in a low voice, come in. Gu Zhining smiled and pushed open the door, scanning the people in the office first. With a regretful click, she said, I thought there were some pretty female secretaries around Master Ji Heir, and I wanted to make a sudden attack. Pei Ji. He is a man, which really disappoints Mrs. Ji. Ji Yunfei pressed his brow and asked in a deep voice, what are you doing here? Gu Zhining raised the lunchbox in her hand and said, your body hasn't fully recovered yet, and you have many taboos. Grandpa is worried that you won't be able to tolerate the food in the cafeteria, so he asked me to bring you a hearty lunch. Chapter 8. The more you look at her, the more satisfied you become. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Pei Ji walked out with great eyes, and Gu Zhining placed the lunchbox on the table. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the document at Ji Yunfei's hand. He didn't know what was on his mind and slowly smiled. But husband, the employees in your company are not very obedient. Ji Yunfei's expression was slightly cold. What do you mean? Literal meaning. Gu Zhining shrugged and said, when I came to find you, I asked the front desk about your office, and they didn't even know that there was someone like you in the Ji group. TSK, how can you say that you are also the second young master of the Ji group? It's not so exaggerated, is it? Ji Yunfei listened attentively to the meaning behind her words, with a deep expression in his eyes. Indeed, in the past 3 years, Ji Yunchuan has made every effort to downplay his influence in the Ji family. A group of his trusted employees who were previously under his command were either transferred to other places or simply laid off, almost a major change in blood. As for the front desk, it is feared that they were also specially instructed. He lowered his eyebrows in contemplation, but suddenly a shadow fell in front of him. He looked up and met Gu Zhining's face, which was just a stone's throw away. She propped her hands on the spacious desk and crossed over half of it, staring at Ji Yunfei's face without hesitation. Ji Yunfei instinctively pulled back a distance, his face tinged with thin anger. Gu Zhining. Is it a headache? Gu Zhining squinted her eyes and smiled like a cunning fox. I can help you, but once it's done, I also have a small request. It's not your turn to talk about the company's affairs. Ji Yunfei said coldly, you just need to do what you need to do. Gu Zhining knew that this person didn't believe him, so she pursed her lips and said, don't believe me. If you don't believe me, then you'll just wait and see. She curled her lips and before turning around to leave the office, she didn't forget to blink her eyes. She handed over a seductive glance and said, remember to take your lunch box with you after you finish. The office door was slammed shut, and Ji Yunfei's brows furrowed heavily. Although this woman's words have always been rambling, he lowered his eyes and looked at his legs in his wheelchair, his eyes deep and focused. Gu Zhining returned to the Ji family and went straight to find Mr. Ji. Grandpa. Has Miss Ning arrived? Mr. Ji greeted her with a smile and took out a quaint redwood box from the drawer. You came just right, this is for you, he said. Gu Zhining opened the box and was slightly stunned. Inside the box was a jade bracelet, transparent and clean, with a warm texture. Even if she didn't know much about jade, she could see its priceless value. Master Ji smiled and said, this is something that our Ji family has passed down to our daughter.In.Law from generation to generation. It is said to have been unearthed from an ancient tomb. I have been forgetting to give it to you these days due to Yunfei's incident. Please keep it. Seeing this, Gu Zhining no longer declined. Anyway, she and Ji Yunfei will only maintain a 3-year marriage relationship. After it ends, they can return it. She put the bracelet around her wrist and shook it in front of Mr. Ji, saying, thank you, Grandpa. After admiring the bracelet, Gu Zhining didn't forget her purpose. Grandpa, I heard from the butler that your waist is not very good. I have learned a set of massage techniques before, which may be useful to you. Let me give you a massage, right? She pressed down one by one along the acupoints perfectly and asked, Grandpa, how do you feel? Originally, Gu Zhining said she wanted to give him a massage, but Mr. Ji thought she was on a whim. However, he didn't expect that with the gentle force on her back, the original soreness had really eased a lot. Miss Ning, where did you learn this technique from? Gu Zhining kept moving her hands and said with a smile, I learned it from my grandmother when I was a child. I also pressed Yunfei's leg last night. Although the doctor said she might not be able to stand up, I still want to try my best. Maybe a miracle will happen. Even though it was Mr. Ji, he couldn't help but feel slightly moved at this moment. Miss Ning, you have a heart. It is his blessing that Yunfei can marry you. Gu Zhining sighed and spoke in a worried tone, even Yunfei has been working too hard. Before his body recovers, he runs to the company and is very busy every day. When I went to the company today to find him, the front desk didn't even know that he had taken over the work, and didn't even know where his office was. Is there such a thing? Mr. Ji's face became a bit solemn. He had been behind the scenes for a long time, and unless it was a major decision, he usually wouldn't interfere in the company's affairs. Since Ji Yunfei fell into a coma, he had been completely focused on Ji Yunfei, rarely asking about the company. He had never expected such a thing to happen, and it was his negligence. He paused for a moment, then suddenly laughed again and said, Miss Ning, you're trying to talk to Yunfei in a different way. Gu Zhining didn't want to hide anything and immediately admitted, indeed, nothing can be hidden from Grandpa. I've only been married for a few days now, so I'm just protecting him. Mr. Ji felt relieved in his heart, and the more he looked at his granddaughter-in-law, the more satisfied he became. Although the Gu family's family background is far inferior to that of the Ji family, the daughter they have taught is lively and agile, and she is also devoted to Yunfei's interests. She is simply incomparable to his sulky grandson. I will handle this matter, Grandpa Ji smiled, you don't have to worry. Sure enough, during dinner, Mr. Ji directly ordered Ji Yunchuan to hand over the shares and powers that originally belonged to Ji Yunfei. Ji Yunchuan's face looked a bit ugly, but he managed to squeeze out a smile and said, Grandpa, Yunfei has been unconscious for 3 years and is not familiar with the current situation of the company. Moreover, the market has undergone many changes, so it's better to take it slow. Ji Yunfei's eyes were heavy, and his gaze fell on Gu Zhining, who had an innocent expression on his face and was bowing his head to drink soup. However, in just a few days, this woman brought him too many surprises. Not only did she promise to cure his leg, but she also coaxed Mr. Ji into obedience. She also wore bracelets from the Ji family's heirloom on her hand. It is precisely because of unfamiliarity that there are more opportunities to adapt. Mr. Ji couldn't see what Ji Yunchuan was thinking, and his face became a bit serious. This matter is settled. Tomorrow, I'll have Old Li go to the company to help with the handover, he said. Old Li is Mr. Ji's confidant. He has been with him for decades, and asking this person to follow him is more of a surveillance than a help. Ji Yunchuan tightened the edge of the table, his eyes racing over a deep resentment, and he whispered, I know, Grandpa. Also, tomorrow Miss Ning will go to the company with Yunfei as Yunfei's private secretary. Mr. Ji smiled and glanced at Gu Zhining. With Miss Ning taking care of Yunfei, I can rest assured. Gu Zhining never expected that in the end, she would still surround herself and refuse, but she didn't get along with any good excuses for a long time. Perhaps in the eyes of Mr. Ji, this is still a good opportunity to cultivate their relationship. Mr. Ji did indeed think so. Chapter 9. With him but without me, with me but without him. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Gu Zhining could only obediently agree, okay. As soon as she returned to the room, she burst out laughing and said, I don't want to wake up early to work. Ji Yunfei turned his wheelchair and said coldly, isn't that exactly what you asked Grandpa for? Gu Zhining couldn't express her bitterness. She lay on the bed for a while, then suddenly remembered something. However, Ji Ershao, can I be considered as helping you? Ji Yunfei still remembers what she said in the office today. What do you want? Gu Zhining rolled her eyes and smiled, no matter what, you will agree. The answer to her was 3 emotionless words. It depends on the situation. Gu Zhining pouted, this person is really cautious. No matter what the situation is, he won't fill his words. Don't worry, I won't make it difficult for you. She grabbed a pillow and hugged it in her arms, announcing, just don't drive me to sleep on the floor, is it simple? Ji Yunfei was taken aback. I thought this woman would seize the opportunity and the lion would speak up loudly, but to my surprise, what she wanted was this: he is not used to sleeping in the same bed as others, but if he were to sleep in different beds, it would inevitably make his grandfather suspicious. After a moment of silence, Ji Yunfei picked up the pillow in Gu Zhining's arms and placed it in the middle of the bed. Sure, but don't cross this line, he said just like this. Gu Zhining was already very satisfied and immediately rolled onto the bed holding the blanket. No problem. She agreed happily, but in the middle of the night, when Ji Yunfei was awakened by waves of poor breathing in his chest, she lowered her eyes and saw a snow-white arm stretching across from the other side of the bed, pressing firmly on his chest. Ji Yunfei's eyebrows twitched heavily and he reached out to push Gu Zhining, saying, wake up. However, Gu Zhining not only did not wake up, but also took an inch to move her legs and placed them directly on him. Her whole body was like an octopus, tightly entwined with him. A light breath fell on Ji Yunfei's neck, and as soon as he lowered his head, he could see the face of the woman next to him. Ji Yunfei's body stiffened uncontrollably. The next morning, Gu Zhining got up early. She didn't need to sleep on the hard ground. The quality of her sleep last night wasn't too good. She lazily stretched her body and got out of bed, only to realize that Ji Yunfei had already woken up. Getting up so early. Gu Zhining murmured softly and looked up to see Ji Yunfei coming out of the bathroom. He glanced at her with a cold expression and walked out without looking back. He was so angry early in the morning. Who called him? Gu Zhining rolled her eyes and hummed a song to wash and change clothes. Today is her first day working as Ji Yunfei's secretary, and it is evident that Mr. Ji has already made arrangements in advance. As soon as she arrived at the company, someone sent her a work permit. "Madam, here are your work permit and employee card. If you need anything, feel free to contact me anytime." Gu Zhining took the work card and lazily glanced at the attentive assistant in front of her, saying, "Are you?" The assistant quickly replied, "My surname is Chen, Chen-Mo. Just call me Xiao Chen." "Xiao Chen." Gu Zhining repeated and smiled. After Chen-Mo left, she tugged at Ji Yunfei's sleeve in exchange for a cold look from the man. "Speak up directly if you have something to say." Gu Zhining bluntly said, "That person, is it your elder brother's person who was sent to monitor you?" Ji Yunfei's eyes were slightly darkened. "How did you tell?" Gu Zhining shrugged and said, "Guess." Previously at the Ji family, she happened to see Chen Mo working as a driver for Ji Yunchuan. She leaned over to Ji Yunfei and smiled, "Leaving such a time bomb by your side is not a good idea. Ji Yunfei knows this. But if you dismiss recklessly, not only will you startle the snake, but you may also be caught by Ji Yunchuan and smeared as disregarding the company contract, causing him to act recklessly. Now that everyone in the company is from Ji Yunchuan, he must be careful and cautious. What's there to worry about?" Gu Zhining smiled cunningly and said, "I have a solution." She called Chen-Mo on the inside line and said, "Go downstairs and buy a cup of milk tea, it's hot." After Chen-Mo retreated, Gu Zhining turned around and met Ji Yunfei's cold gaze. "What do you want to do again? What excessive things can I do as a weak and helpless little secretary?" Gu Zhining deliberately choked her throat as she spoke, her voice so delicate that it was about to drip water. "Mr. Ji, rest assured that I won't let you down," she said. In no time, Chen-Mo returned. He handed the milk tea to Gu Zhining and said, "Madam Heir, this is your milk tea." Before the last word could be finished, the cup of milk tea fell straight to the ground. Warm liquid splashed out, and Gu Zhining was also sprinkled with a lot. Ji Yunfei frowned and stood up. Just as he was about to pass, he heard Gu Zhining scream. "You intentionally did it." She pointed at Chen-Mo and angrily said, "I can't even buy a cup of milk tea. Is the company paying you a salary to make you eat idle food, or are you just looking down on me?" Chen-Mo didn't expect it to turn out like this, standing in confusion and saying, "No, it's not me." He was holding it very steadily, but Gu Zhining didn't catch it himself. But at Gu Zhining's continuous pace, he didn't even have the opportunity to explain. The office door was not closed, attracting many onlookers. Seeing this, Gu Zhining's voice became louder. In the end, she simply pulled at Ji Yunfei and said, "There's him but not me here, there's me but not him. Either transfer him away, or let's go directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau." Ji Yunfei. He was forced to watch a magnificent play, and Gu Zhining acted vividly. While facing Chen-Mo with her back, she blinked at him with a clear meaning. "The steps have all been handed over to you, and if you don't know how to get down, it would be foolish." Chen-Mo was transferred to the marketing department first. Ji Yunfei spoke in a low voice, "And the salary and benefits remain unchanged." Chen-Mo's face changed. The marketing department is the farthest away from Ji Yunfei's office. If it were really there, it would be difficult to even see each other, let alone complete what Mr. Ji said. He was unwilling to ask Ji Yunfei for a few more words of affection, but the idea had just emerged, and before he could speak, it was abruptly cut off by Gu Zhining. "Why don't you hurry up and get out of here? Do you insist on firing you?" Do you know who I am? As long as I say one word, you have to pack your things and leave. Chenimo had to shut up and leave the office in frustration. After the employees who were watching the excitement outside the door dispersed, Gu Zhining lay down on the sofa like a bone was pulled out. All right now, you're suffering from a major illness and you're gone, but my image. After today, I'm afraid the whole company will spread. The second young lady of the Ji family is so arrogant and domineering, relying on herself to marry into the Ji family. She put on airs and became a small person. Chapter 10. My husband treats me well. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Gu Zhining suddenly got up from the sofa and glared fiercely at Ji Yunfei. No, you have to take responsibility. Ji Yunfei's expression was faint, his gaze fixed on the screen in front of him, and he heard the words with a slight smile. Her image is gone, but in the eyes of the employees I'm afraid I've also become a foolish ruler. After work, Gu Zhining did not return to the Ji family, but went directly to the hospital. Since her mother was transferred by the Gu family, Gu Guosheng instructed her to visit her only once a month, and she had to be under the supervision of the on-site bodyguards before entering the hospital room. She even claimed to be the best treatment for her mother. It's simply about to cover up. Gu Zhining walked into the hospital gate and just as she came out of the elevator, she bumped into a familiar person at the corner. Oh, isn't this the second young lady of the Ji family? Gu Yanyan hugged her arms and gestured at her. Did you come to see your old and immortal mother again? Ji Yunfei won't even come to accompany you. Gu Zhining's eyes turned cold. She doesn't mind how Gu Yanyan insults her, but what she can't tolerate the most is that they insult her mother. It seems that you forgot the lesson from last time so quickly. Gu Zhining's face remained expressionless as she glanced out the window and smiled with her lips hooked. However, this is the 14th floor, and if you fall down, you might end up in pieces. Do you want to give it a try? Gu Yanyan thought of the last time she was at the Ji family. This woman lifted her out of the railing, and her face changed instantly. What's so arrogant about you? She gritted her teeth and said, don't think that Ji Yunfei is protecting you, you really treat yourself like a dish. When I marry Yun Chuan, don't you still have to kneel on the ground and beg for mercy like before? Gu Zhining was stunned, and a corner of her eye caught a glimpse of the department where Gu Yanyan had just come out, which was the obstetrics and gynecology department. Is it true that Gu Yanyan is pregnant with Ji Yunchuan's child? She smiled even more and said, really? But I don't think Ji Yunchuan has that idea. Ji Yunchuan clearly took advantage of the Gu family and wanted to use their hands to obtain Ji Yunfei's mind. Only the Gu family members were so foolish as to say whatever they believed, and the large pancakes painted by Ji Yunchuan kept slipping around. With all my heart set on climbing the Ji family and achieving great success in the future, I never thought about what would happen if Ji Yunchuan were to fail and hide behind the scenes. He could have completely taken away himself, but what would happen if Gu family had no foundation? And Gu Zhining said coldly, you are not the only lover of Ji Yunchuan. The idea of getting married as a son may not work well, right? Gu Yanyan's face changed instantly. Gu Zhining's words undoubtedly hit the pain point she least wanted others to mention. Although Ji Yunchuan has always been gentle and considerate to her, every time she mentions marriage, it is perfunctory and vague. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so anxious either. As soon as she felt a little unwell, she felt pregnant and couldn't wait for a check-up. She was hoping that if she could really conceive Ji Yunchuan's child, she would have a legitimate reason to get engaged. Unfortunately, Ji Yunchuan doesn't even want to marry you. Gu Zhining bluntly poked through. Shut up. Gu Yanyan was furious and said, you bitch, you're just jealous of me. She rushed forward and wanted to take action, but before she could even touch Gu Zhining, her wrist was grabbed. A tall figure stood in front of Gu Zhining with good steps, and the man's expression was cold and fierce, vigorously shaking off Gu Yanyan's hand. Ji Yunfei's voice was cold. I have seen the tutor of the Gu family. Gu Zhining tugged at his hem behind him and said, why did you come? She came to the hospital without telling anyone. Ji Yunfei glanced at her without answering, only looking at Gu Yanyan. The oppressive feeling in his dark eyes was like substance. No matter whether your Gu family has education or not, my people are not something you can touch. Gu Yanyan's face was ugly and tense. She never dreamed that Ji Yunfei would also come over, and for a moment, she froze in place. But even if she had no brain, she knew she hadn't married Ji Yunchuan yet. Ji Yunfei was also the flesh of Mr. Ji's heart, far beyond her ability to provoke. Moreover, if Ji Yunfei were to detect her in the Gu family's plan, it would be a complete waste of previous efforts. With a resentful glare at Gu Zhining, Gu Yanyan could only reluctantly apologize, I was impulsive just now, I'm sorry. The last few words were gritted by her teeth, but Gu Zhining was very receptive. She waved her hand with a smile and said, my sister is too talkative. Although she is not sensible, I have a large number of adults who are sisters, so I won't argue with you. Please pay attention next time. Gu Yanyan tightly clenched his palm, wishing to cut Gu Zhining to pieces. But in the end, she could only turn her head and leave. Gu Zhining watched as Gu Yanyan walked away, then leaned over to Ji Yunfei's wheelchair and said, how could Master Ji come here? Ji Yunfei frowned, and before he could answer, the woman beside him tilted her head and patted his leg, saying, I understand. My husband is worried about me. Hi, there's nothing hard to admit about this. If you're worried, just let me know. Ji Yunfei's expression was indifferent. He directly pushed away Gu Zhining's hand and said in a deep voice, you've been overthinking it. I'm just worried that you might be playing tricks behind my back. After hitting a nail, Gu Zhining's smile didn't diminish as she pushed Ji Yunfei's wheelchair towards the ward and said, all right, I know you're shy, I won't say anything. Ji Yunfei. This woman is just talking to herself. Gu Zhining didn't care much and went straight to her mother's ward. Mom. She curved her lips and smiled softly, I came to see you. Song Xuanyu leaned against the bedside and saw Gu Zhining approaching. Her eyes lit up and she said, Ning Ning. As the words fell, she noticed Ji Yunfei in the wheelchair and hesitated for half a second, who is this? Ji Yunfei didn't expect that Gu Zhining came to the hospital to visit her mother. Previously, when investigating Gu Zhining, he also read information about Qin Xuanyu. Originally from a scholarly family, the young lady married Gu Guosheng despite her parents' opposition, but did not want to be drained of blood by Gu Guosheng and kicked out of the house. Later, she remarried and married Gu Zhining's high school teacher. Gu Zhining pushed Ji Yunfei into the ward and introduced Qin Xuanyu with a smile, Mom, this is my husband, as I told you before. Qin Xuanyu's expression suddenly became quite complicated. Regarding Gu Zhining's marriage into the Ji family, she did hear about it from the Gu family, but at that time she was still unconscious and had not had time to stop it. When she woke up, everything was done and there was no chance to stop her. Now that Ji Yunfei has disabled legs and is not good for her actions, how can she be a good match for her daughter? Gu Zhining saw Qin Xuanyu's thoughts and knew that she had been blaming herself for this matter. She smiled and comforted him, Mom, don't worry, my husband is so kind to me. As she spoke, she turned to ask Ji Yunfei, isn't it, husband?